Welcome to a very special episode of Disclosure Talk Radio from the good people at the Voice of Prophecy. My name is Shawn Boonstra, and if you happen to be tuning in for the first time, you are more than welcome to stick around. And of course, if you're tuning in for the 100th time, well, we'd probably have you stick around too and enjoy what we're going to talk about today. And something tells me you're going to want to stick around today because, well, we've actually got an authentic piece of American history joining us on the program, a former member of Bill Haley and the Comets. You know, the band who brought you Rock Around the Clock and Shake, Rattle, and Roll, the anthems of a teenage generation back in the 1950s when, well, the American rock and roll scene really was born. Now, if you happen to be listening and you're from the millennial generation like my kids are, let me pause for just a moment because the song I mentioned, Rock Around the Clock, I should probably stop and explain what a clock is. All right, because if you're going to rock around the clock, you have to know what the clock is. And I know that some of you out there are laughing because you think everybody knows what a clock is. But if you're over 40 or 50 years of age, try taking an old analog clock. You know, the one that has a face and has either 2 or 3 hands, you know, depending on whether or not it has a hand that marks the seconds, and go and ask a 20-something if they can read that thing. I challenge you this week, and the 20-somethings in the control room are laughing at me right now, but Amanda, you're in the control room. Can you read an analog clock? You can do it. Congratulations. You are in the 1% of the millennial generation. And my kids can do it too, but it takes them a moment to do it. But I challenge you, go and ask your kids, see if they can read an old-fashioned clock. And I've found that some of them can't. I was horrified at first. When they couldn't read a clock, I was absolutely horrified at the state of American education. And then I realized that I really can't read a sundial. I really can't. I mean, I can, but I have to struggle and think about it and slow down and analyze that thing. So maybe the problem, Amanda, isn't that there's not a problem with the millennial generation. Maybe the real problem is that I'm actually a dinosaur now and that I'm about to fade off of the scene, and I can't accept that nobody knows the things that I grew up with, like analog clocks and cursive writing. And is my generation really ready for the dustbin of history, Amanda? Is that what's going on? Yeah, no, oh, I'm fine, she says. Yeah. Can you read a sundial? No, you can't read I can read a sundial and an analog clock. But I digress. We got to get back to the topic. When Rock Around the Clock hit the airwaves, I think it was written in 1954, went on the air in 1955. It stayed at number 1 in the charts for 8 solid weeks. It sold something like 25 million copies worldwide. And even though today's generation kind of thinks of that song and that generation is innocent and pure, I mean, you're used to it as the background music and TV shows and movies and elevator music. Even though we kind of think of it as innocent and pure, it really was, as one historian of rock and roll puts it, an anthem for rebellious teenagers in the day. It was a symbol of throwing away the values of their parents' generation. Just like the songs I grew up with were really a rejection of my forefathers' values. My guest today is Pastor Louis Torres, and he was a member of Bill Haley and the Comets, which does make him a part of modern American history. But today I haven't asked him on the program because he can play guitar or because he was a part of the shift in American culture. I've asked him on the program because he's gone through a rather profound shift himself, going from success in the entertainment industry to actually preaching the gospel of Christ. And right now he's in Michigan, where he's actually just finished evangelistic meetings for the public and preaching the gospel. Pastor Torrez, welcome to the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's great to hear your voice. We've run into each other over the years a few times. Let me ask you this, though. Can you read an analog clock?
I still am able to do that, yes.
Yeah. Or were you aware that you're going to go out this afternoon, I know you will, and talk to some 20-somethings, and you need to survey them and see how many of them can do it, and then see how many of them can write in cursive. Because I think, there are schools that actually reject essays done in cursive. The teacher will send it back or fail you if you write it in cursive. And that makes me a dinosaur. I guess I'm off the market. But hey, listen, I think maybe the best place to start today would be at the very beginning of your story. Where do you come from? What happened in those years leading up to your career as an entertainer?
I was born in the island of Puerto Rico to a very poor family. My dad had abandoned the family and left my mother with 6 children who had to go beg for food. And she was a squatter. And I remember holding on to her skirt as she went from door to door trying to get food for us.
Wow.
We then were fortunate to get a stepfather who decided that we should go to someplace else, New York. And so they moved us to New York City, to Brooklyn, New York, to a Hasidic Orthodox Jewish neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
And it was really quite different from what I was used to.
It's another island, though, right? Brooklyn, you're on another island.
Brooklyn is an island, that's correct. But Brooklyn has, I think, 4 million population.
Oh, that's like 8 times the population of my home country, Canada. That's not true. Please don't call in, Canadians. Don't. So you're in a Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn. Quite a shift for your family.
Yeah, it was difficult times because my mother couldn't speak English. My stepfather went back to Puerto Rico and to make enough money to send the rest of the kids, because they could only afford to take 3 kids. So 3 of us and my mom were living in this one-room apartment in Brooklyn. And 3 months later, after my stepfather went back to Puerto Rico, he died. And so my mother was in New York devastated.
Oh, wow.
With 3 kids on one side and 3 kids on the other side, couldn't speak English. So she went off to work, and I went, and I was the babysitter for my baby brother. 6 years old at that time. And then what happened was we moved from one place to another, and it's the first time I experienced what people call racism.
Right.
In those days, there was a lot of tension between the Puerto Ricans and the Italians. The West Side Story kind of epitomized that.
The Sharks and the Jets.
Yeah, and so a man came up to me and cleared his throat like he had something awful to spit out, and he spat on the gutter and said, "Why don't you go back where you came from?" And I had never experienced that kind of racism in my life. And mind you, I'm about 10 years old, and that exacerbated the fact that I was born poor, born an immigrant, born a Puerto Rican, and on top of that, now I'm not worth even spittle.
Wow. And you're 10 years old. The guy's
10 years old.
He's essentially spitting on you is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Wow. So what impact did that have on you at that point? 10 years old and you've been called worthless by somebody.
I began to feel like I was incomplete, like I had to do something to get rid of that reproach. And I didn't know how to do it. In my little mind, I thought if I could just accomplish something or do something, show that I was somebody or something. And I thought I could do it. First of all, roller skating. I became an excellent roller skater. I could roller skate over 8 barrels garbage cans.
You would jump 8 barrels. 8 barrels. Wow.
Yeah, I could fly over them, and I thought that if I could do 8 barrels, I would feel complete. Well, I did it, and the magic that I thought would swoop over me was not there. And so then I got into trampolining, and I thought if I could do a double somersault, which was one of the difficult ones to do, I would reach that. And again, tried that, and once I did the double somersault, I thought that some sensation would come over me that would finally settle the thing. But I was disillusioned. Then I thought girls came into focus, and I thought if I could get this beautiful girl to be my girlfriend, I would surely feel complete. And I did for a few moments.
I think you just got the attention of every young man listening, because we all come to that moment where girls come into focus, and you start looking for meaning in that direction.
Yeah, so she was a pretty girl, and all my buddies were after her, and I succeeded in beating them. And I remember walking through the schoolyard with her arm around my arm,
Yep.
And I used to see the guys scream with envy, and I used to think, "Eat your heart out, boys."
Wow.
But then, summer came, and school was over, and she found somebody that could make her complete.
Oh, no.
and it just shattered my
Well,
my ego.
I got a Dear Shawn letter, not a Dear John letter. I got a Dear Shawn letter when I was 14 from the first girl I ever asked out, and that shattered me. It's like, wow, I guess I'm not cool.
It was really devastating, and the worst part of it was that the song that became popular on the charts was called "Steal with a Kiss."
Yeah.
Yeah, and the words were, "Yes, it's going to be a cool, lonely summer."
Oh no.
So every time I heard that song, I would cry.
Oh, no. I shouldn't be laughing now, but when you're that age, that's pretty real angst.
It was real end.
Yeah.
So I decided that these things were not working, and somehow I got interested in music, and we formed a group called Donnie and the Twilights. And at first I was a bitter tone, and then I became a baritone.
I'm still a bitter tone, Louie. Still a bitter tone.
So we then what happened was that when we would do our practice was in the entrance of the subway in New York City. You know.
Well, that would sound amazing.
Entrances have a lot of reverb, a lot of echo.
Oh yeah, that's why I sing in the shower.
Okay, so we would sing in that, and Donnie, our lead singer, you know, today they call it doo-wop.
Right.
So we had three guys that sang harmony. One did the bass, and the other one did the melody. So Donnie had a golden voice. In fact, what's his name? Come to me anyway. Count Basie.
Yeah.
Heard him and tried to entice him to come and join him.
Wow.
But Donnie and we were so close as brothers, you know, that he chose not to. And then some man came along. He heard us singing in the subway, and he said, "You guys need a manager." We didn't know what that was. So he said, "Look, I'll talk to your parents, and if it's okay with them, I'll manage you." And so at 12 years old now, we get tailor-made suits, brand new car with our name on the side of it, Donnie the Twilights, and a manager.
You're 12 years old.
12 years old.
Wow. And was the suit sharkskin by chance?
It was what?
Was it a sharkskin suit?
It was. A sharkskin suit with a velvet black collar.
I still think that looks great, by the way. Yeah.
So we came home, you know, with the sharkskin suits and all that, and everybody in the block was wowing. So we began to perform in different nightclubs in New York City. And, of course, in those days, there was no law of 12-year-old kids playing in bars.
Wow.
But we were doing concerts and all that in these bars. And unfortunately, though, Donnie got into drugs, which was part of the scenario. And at 15, they found him overdosed.
Okay, we're going to take a little break, Louie. I hear them playing the music, and they're pushing me a little bit. I'm talking to Louis Torres, one-time member of Bill Haley and the Comets. He's telling the story of how he ended up in the entertainment industry. At this point in the story, he's with Donnie and the Twilights. We just found out that Donnie had some problems, and we'll continue the story right after this break. When we do come back, you'll want to take advantage of the offer you're about to listen to from the people at the Voice of Prophecy, so grab a pen and paper.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
You are listening to Disclosure Talk Radio from the people at the Voice of Prophecy. My name is Shawn Boonstra, if you're just tuning in. My guest today, Pastor Louis Torres, one-time member of Bill Haley and the Comets, and he's sharing his life story, how he ended up becoming a minister of the gospel. And Louis, just before the break, you were talking about your time with Donnie and the Twilights. You're 12 years old. A man has offered to manage you because he heard you at a subway station. And you had just mentioned that Donnie started to develop some personal challenges.
Yeah, unfortunately, he was found overdosed at the age of 15. So we were together for a couple of years, and then when that happened, it devastated us, and we didn't know what to do. So we decided to continue on, and we became part of a group called the Vampires. I say we because there was another fellow with me, Joe, who decided to follow along with me. And the Vampires, then, we became quite popular, again, with the quest to find some completeness in me. I thought that if we could become a musician, that somehow this magical thing would swoop over me. And so I became a musician. I was a singer, performing. And by this time with the Vampires, we had three managers. The borough president of New York, Brooklyn, New York, was our manager. His assistant was our assistant manager, and then we had a booking agent. So now we're performing in, for example, the Waldorf Astoria.
Wow.
We became group number one of Broadway for a week. Things were moving along, and then
did you actually dress like vampires?
We will not feel complete until we can be recording artists.
Wow. Now, did you actually do the whole vampire shtick? Did you guys dress like vampires, or is that something new? I mean, that seemed really popular in the late 1990s among teenagers, but did you actually put on an act like you were vampires?
Well, we discovered if you want to get attention, do something stupid.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what we did.
Yeah.
We dressed like vampires with capes and all that. Bats all over. Our vehicle was a funeral hearse.
Oh, no.
We would put white spray on the sides of our hair, so it looked like gray hair on the sides. We did the whole thing.
Wow. So I hope you're listening, kids. That wasn't new in the 1990s. Louis pioneered that one. So, all right, so you had three managers, though. That couldn't have been cheap either.
Well, we were paying 50% of our income to these fellas. And we finally decided to cut two of them off. Only we forgot that the equipment belonged to them.
Oh, no.
So we were without equipment, but we were performing in a nightclub in New Jersey called the Golden Nugget. And we had made that Golden Nugget very popular, and the owner was breaking down walls to create more dancing space. So when we lost our equipment, we told the owner we couldn't perform anymore. He said, "You have to." Well, we don't have equipment. He said, "Well, I'll take care of that. Come see me tomorrow." So he took us to a what they call a bookie joint.
Oh, that is not good.
And when we went downstairs, I saw Frank Sinatra and other famous people, their pictures along the wall. So then I knew that these folk were sponsors of these famous people. And then the fella came with a big cigar and asked us to call him Godfather Nicky, and took us to buy all the equipment. We bought all the equipment. He paid cash for it, and then we had to sign a contract with the association. In those days, it was a name for the organization that we had just become members of, better known as the Mafia.
Yeah, that's not good. That doesn't sound good at all.
My brothers, one of my brothers was a president of a gang, Puerto Rican gang, and the other one was a terrorist. And they would always talk, and I would hear the older brothers talk. You never want to get into the Mafia because if you get in, you can't get out. And now, circumstances, here I was now with these folk, and I felt uncomfortable, and yet I still felt like I hadn't reached what I wanted to reach, so I thought I might as well stick with it. And but there was those quiet moments at nightclubs, as we went performing different places, the hotels, motels where we stayed. The quiet moments that made me feel like there was still something missing, and I thought it was just more money, or more women, or more this, or more that. I would reach that place that I can't seem to be able to get to, and so finally, I was so upset with the situation and learning things that were happening with the mafia that I wanted to get out. And so we got into an argument, and I left the band. At that point, I didn't care if they broke my legs or what they did to me. And when I left the band, then I didn't know what to do. And I went to visit one of my friends who was performing in a place called the Cafe Wa, in a little place called the Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
Which is very famous in New York City. So I went down there to listen to him as he was performing, and somebody came in to talk to him, and my friend was pointing to me, and the fella came up to me and he said, "Hey, I understand you play the bass." I said, "Yeah, what about it?" He said, "I understand you're one of the best in town." I said, "Well, I am, but what is it?" I was used to be very humble. So,
this would be you're now in the 1960s?
1960s, yeah.
Okay.
So I said, what's up? And he said, would you like to perform with Bill Haley and the Comets? I said, go on, because there are a lot of shysters, we call them, or phonies in New York. They would offer you the Brooklyn Bridge, and people would fall for it and buy it. But
so there would be imposters that were recruiting people, but they had no real connection to anything famous.
There are a lot of people who, what they were hoping was that you would be the act, the term we used to use, to make them famous. All
right. So I would naturally have suspicion that that this guy wouldn't even know Bill Haley.
Well, that was my suspicion, but it turned out that he was the lead guitar player for Bill Haley.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So is this how you ended up with Bill Haley?
So what happened was, he said, "Well, I hear that you're top notch," and I said, "Look, if it's true, then what do I have to do?" He said, "Well, you need to audition." So I said, when? He said, tomorrow. So we got together, and he said, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? In those days, I could take the bass guitar and put it behind my neck and go in a split and play a solo, et cetera. So I was doing this. Can you play this? Can you play that? I said, sure, and played it. And then he said, well, can you do a solo? I said, of course. And I went into my split and started walking around his room in a split with the bass guitar behind my neck playing a solo. And he'd never seen anything like that before.
Oh, wow. So that's the moment they signed you then? Or I guess signed would be the wrong word because it's for live performance.
What's that? Say that again?
Oh, did they that's the moment where you found your way into the band, where they signed you up with Bill Haley.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I passed the audition with flying colors, and next thing I know, I was a member of the Bill Haley and the Comets.
Wow. That must have felt a little surreal, though. I mean, that must have felt surreal, though. It was
surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, here's this poor little PR.
Yeah.
Growing up in this poor family in a ghetto, etc., and all of a sudden, poof! I'm a member of the most famous band in the world at that time.
Unbelievable.
Everybody knew Bill Haley and the Comets.
Yeah, for sure. They still do. Did I lose you?
No. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, unbelievable. So I know Ruben, you're from Puerto Rico, aren't you? Yeah, we've got 2 Puerto Ricans here on staff. And why haven't you joined a famous band? Yeah, you're an underachiever. That's what's going on. So you've ended up there. Listen, I know we've got a break coming up in a couple of minutes, but I've heard you tell this story before, and I know there was a moment where you went to a party in Jersey City where the first thoughts about God sort of showed up in your thinking as all of this is happening. Didn't you end up in a drug party there where somebody asked some questions that started you thinking?
Yeah, what happened was there was a motorcycle gang of about 50, like the Hells Angels, that used to follow us around. And they threw a drug party there in Jersey City.
Yeah.
And they offered all the drugs were free, STP, DNT, LSD, whatever you wanted, you could, partake of. So we all got inebriated or intoxicated or drunk or whatever you want to call it. And then somebody raised the question, who is God? I should say then, by this time I was cynical against religion.
Right.
I had seen all sorts of things that just completely turned me away from God and church, etc. I became godless. I'm ashamed to admit that now, but
right.
I thought that religion was for people who were not too smart, I thought you either had to be, if you were old and ugly, you might as well go to church because you couldn't do anything else.
I don't think that attitude's changed out there, though. I run into a lot of people who think church is for the feeble or for those who've got nothing else going on for them. I don't know that that's changed in all those years. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Well, that's the way I thought. So when I had these moments, when I felt something missing, I never thought it was God. I never thought it was church. I always thought it was more drugs or more this, more that. So here we are in this drug party, and somebody says, "Who's God?" And we spent the entire night discussing God. And I still remember vividly the conclusions we came to, erroneously so, but I can remember that. And it's strange because I don't remember a lot of stuff that I did when I was in show business, but that night stands out in my memory and the conclusions. So at 4 o'clock, I leave the drug party. I'm driving home, and all of a sudden, a terrifying thought struck me. If there is a God, I'm in serious trouble.
Wow. You know what? And I think that's a base question for anybody to consider. I know we're up against a break, Louie, and I want everybody to think about that during the break. If there is a God, what does that mean for you? If it's real, if it's true, what does that mean in your life? My guest today on Disclosure is Pastor Louis Torres, one-time member of Bill Haley and the Comets. He's sharing his story where he went from a poor village in Puerto Rico to the top of the ladder in fame and still couldn't find the completeness that he was looking for. Let me ask you out there, what are you looking for? Have you found completeness? Do you feel like everything is together, or are you still looking for something more? I want you to grab a pen and paper and take advantage of this offer from the Voice of Prophecy, and I'll be right back with Pastor Louis Torres after this.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamara. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
And we are back from the break. You're listening to Disclosure from the Voice of Prophecy. My name is Shawn Boonstra. My guest today is Pastor Louis Torres, who was not always a pastor, but at one time had risen to the pinnacle of the entertainment industry, was a member of Bill Haley and the Comets, and before that, the Vampires. And Louis, just before we took the break, you were driving home from a party, a drug party, and a question. You guys have been discussing whether or not God is real or what the nature of God is at that party, and on your way home, you had a rather terrifying thought pop into your head.
Yeah, the thought was, if there is a God, I'm in serious trouble. And that thought scared me. And I just pushed it out of my mind because I did not want to have to deal with that. So I just shrugged it off. And then I go to that Cafe Wow place and find myself with Bill Haley and the Comets. And what's amazing is that when I became part of the Comets, I assumed that because they were high flyers, that they were not into the kind of things that we were into.
You're talking about
with the mafia and the drugs and all that.
Right. Okay. And
I was disillusioned. I couldn't believe one of the fellows had a $200 drug habit.
$200. I'm trying to reckon that math. If this is the 1960s, that's got to be $2,000 or $3,000 in today's money.
He was spending money, and he was so skinny that we had to actually straight pin his jacket so it looked like it fit him. So we would straight pin him in the back. He never gave his back to the audience because he had these straight pins on his jacket. And then, Bill and Rudy Pompelli was the saxophone player.
Right.
After our performance, they would disappear and just get drunk. And we didn't see them again until time to perform again. And I was greatly annoyed with the reality that this is real life. I thought people at that height had something better to do with their lives, but I was just disillusioned. But again, Rudy said to me, Louie, he said, you're too good for us, and when we get to Hollywood, I'll introduce you to people there that can keep you going up the ladder. So based upon that, then, I thought, well, if I can't reach my feeling completeness here, maybe with this other opportunity, I'll get to the place where finally I can find my quest.
I find it very interesting that, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. I had a background in politics, and I never became famous or anything like that, but I remember a moment seeing a fellow at a fundraiser, and I had gone into the men's restroom for a moment, and here's one of the most powerful people I had ever seen or met. I only really knew him from TV. And he's drunk on the floor, Louie, and there's snot running down his face. He's crying. Something bad has happened that day. And he looks up at me. I'll never forget it. And he says, I have nothing. I have absolutely, and I'm looking at that thinking, you have everything that I'm trying to get in my life, and you're miserable. So I can't even imagine what it's like for you. You're looking for completeness. You're looking for something more. You're hoping that when you get to the next level, it'll be better than the last level. And now you discover that these incredibly famous people who should be complete, or at least in your opinion should be complete, are just as unhappy. They're medicating their unhappiness just like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And but you think this is life, you just live it, make the best you can of it. So I stuck with it. And then the Beatles have become popular. In fact, where we used to record with the Vampires was a building right next door to Ed Sullivan's show building.
Right.
So I used to walk in Broadway all the time, and we see the Barbra Streisand and other people, and so when the Beatles became famous, then it sidelined Bill Haley, and at the same time, I remember performing in a club where buckwheat, a lot of people...
Oh, Little Rascals buckwheat?
Yeah, the Little Rascal buckwheat.
No way.
Yeah, buckwheat used to come to my club. It was called the Colt 45 in Broadway.
Uh-huh.
And buckwheat would come there with a Roaring Twain hat, a brim hat, patent leather, black and white shoes, double-breasted jacket, and a little handkerchief in his pocket. And he would come dinner bopping. I don't know if people know what that is, but just walking kind of like with a little hop to you.
Okay.
And he would say, "Hey, Lou, how are you?" They used to call me Lou. So we'd sit down and talk. And buckwheat just never had anything to talk about future. It was always, he loathed the fact that he was no longer famous, that he would no longer have the high activities, that the exhilaration that comes from show business. And then I would have to go and perform, and he would then get up with his handkerchief, he'd pull it out, and then hold it between his two hands, and then he would act like this was a girl that he's holding, okay? And then he goes around in circles.
Wow.
With his handkerchief.
And
I'm thinking to myself, I hope I never end up to be like this guy.
No. That's kind of sad, though, because I think everybody eventually discovers that most of the human race only has use for you as long as you seem useful, and then they just toss you aside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but what happened was that we got word, at least I was told by Bill and Rudy, that we're going to do a tour, a world tour, and that we were going to go and compete against the Beatles, because the Beatles had written a derogatory story against our lack of musicianship. And so I was looking forward to go and compete against Paul McCartney,
Right.
And so I thought that would be it, man. If I can go and do that, and if I could show that I'm a better musicianship, etc. So I was looking forward to that. And we took a break, and I went home to see my mother. And when I got home, wow, my brother was on his knees praying. And he spooked me because my mother was into Spiritism.
Right.
And we knew more about Satanism than we knew anything about God. And so he was using my name. So I went to my mother and said, "What's wrong with him?" And she said, "I just leave him alone. He's become religious." So he came to talk to me, and he began to talk to me about Jesus. And I'm sorry to say, it just infuriated me. And I said, keep that to yourself. I don't want to hear that stuff. He said, "Well, you don't understand." I said, "I understand one thing. If you don't quit talking to me, we're going to have to fight."
What was your hesitation there? I mean, I think a lot of people feel that are out there listening, that Jesus comes up and they kind of bristle at it. What do you think was making you bristle when he mentioned Jesus?
Well, because I have become cynical against people who are religious. I thought it was just people were kind of lame-brained.
Right.
And why are you talking to me about this Jesus? My feeling was most of it has to do with also sensing that I was not ready to hear anything about religion because I had become so turned off by it.
So your brother is praying for you when you get home, and if your mom's into spiritualism, you must have assumed, too, that there must have been something kind of hokey going on with that prayer.
He was using my name, and usually I knew, because my mother sometimes would take me to seances, and I knew that they would use people's handkerchiefs or something that belonged to them to put a spell on them. So
Wow.
I thought my brother was trying to put a spell on me.
I shouldn't even laugh at that, because that stuff does go on, but it is funny that someone's praying for you and you read it completely wrong. So he's praying for you. He tries to tell you about Jesus. You don't want to hear it. What happens next?
about 2 days later, my oldest brother comes out to visit, and he tells me that he's going to get baptized. I thought some sickness, some terrible disease had affected these guys.
Yeah. I've got that disease, by the way, Louie. So
what's that?
I said I have that disease. I have what affected your brother. So
well, I thought they had gone bonkers. What's wrong with these guys? They don't have fun anymore. You know, they don't go out with the girls, and they don't do this, and they don't do that, and they don't jump around, and they don't get high on drugs anymore. What do they do for fun?
Right. So they're getting, your brother, you said, getting baptized. Did you watch that baptism? Did you end up seeing it?
Out of respect, I went, and when I got there, I felt so out of place because I hadn't been to church in years. And my sister-in-law got baptized first. When she got plunged in the water and she came up, she was crying. And I thought, silly women, they always cry about nothing.
Yeah, so that didn't really make an impression on you.
No, I thought, what's she crying about? You get in the water, you come out of the water, what's there to cry about? So then my brother takes her place then, and he gets put in the water. He comes up, and he's crying. Now, that troubled me because I had never seen my oldest brother ever cry. And when he was crying up in front, all of a sudden that experience of 2 years before came back to me. Could they have found God?
Wow.
What's made them different? Why are they so different? These are not the same boys that I grew up with.
Right, and it seemed to you different than the other religious people you'd become exposed to over the years.
It was completely different. The other ones, for example, the altar boy was my next-door neighbor. Wally was his name. Wally had the filthiest mouth on the block, and he was the altar boy.
Right.
The priest used to come to take my friends to his apartment.
Oh, no.
The Jewish kids took me to the synagogue so they could show me how to get drunk for free. While the rabbi was busy, they would go into the refrigerator and get out the Manischewitz wine that the rabbi had in there, and they'd get drunk, and they leave the church, the synagogue, drunk. So that's what I was exposed to.
Okay. Well, Louie, we're going to push the pause button. We're up against a break, and we've got one more segment to go, and I'm eager to hear what happens next because obviously you're on your way to a relationship with Christ fairly shortly after this. My guest today on the program is Pastor Louis Torres, a one-time entertainer, rock star, and now a gospel minister, a minister of Christ. And you're not going to want to miss what happens next. His sister-in-law and brother have just been baptized. He watched it, and he's beginning to wonder if they haven't found what he was looking for once upon a time when he was contemplating whether or not God existed and what that meant for him. You're not going to want to miss this. In the meantime, grab a pen and paper. You're going to write down everything that happens in the next 30 seconds or so because it could be the moment that your life takes a dramatic turn. We'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And we are back from the break. I hope you wrote all of that down. It could be the moment where you start to discover meaning in your life. My guest today on Disclosure is Pastor Louis Torres, who is one-time guitarist Louis Torres with Bill Haley and the Comets. And Louis, just before the break, you were talking about the fact that your brother, your sister-in-law had been baptized, and you went to see that. And now you're wondering, what have they found? Did they find what you had been looking for? Did they discover God? What happens with you from that point forward? Because you had mentioned that you were on your way to Europe with a world tour because the Comets felt compelled to compete against the Beatles.
That's correct. So when I saw my brother get baptized and I saw him crying, I was moved. With the thought came back that perhaps they have found this God. But it brought the same fear back. If there is a God, I'm in serious trouble. So I wanted to, I couldn't help but be impressed that something had changed their lives. But I began to fear because I did not want to change, because I felt that if I change, then I would have to be like them. And my quest for what I was trying to find, which I thought was in the world, show business, women, and so forth, would finally dash away. So I tried to remove myself from their influence, but something kept on impressing me that maybe this is what I've been looking for. But at the same time, the excitement, the exhilaration of doing this tour, etc., just kept on beckoning at me, and I decided I better get out of town. You know, I was afraid that whatever was got a hold of my brothers would get a hold of me. Mm-hmm. And so they called me up a day before I was supposed to leave and told me that it had been postponed, that the tour had been postponed. Then I felt I was corralled. I decided then I was going to prove to this God, if he's there, that I need this exciting life. So I heard about a dance going on at the St. George Hotel, which was a famous hotel in Brooklyn. And I went there because they were going to have bands playing. 9 bands would be playing nonstop music from 9 to 4 in the morning. So I then got there and began to dance. And because I was a professional dancer, I loved dancing. And finally, after getting to midnight, went up to the balcony mm-hmm. to look and see if there was some other girl whose talents were commensurate to mine.
Right. Well, you're looking for a good dance partner.
Right. So as I'm looking down, it was the days when there was a monkey and the chicken and the dog and the waddle. These were the names of the dances, okay?
Yeah. Unfortunately, they've only gotten worse in the years since, I think. But, yeah, the monkey, chicken, the dog, and the waddle.
Yeah. So I'm looking down at all these beehives, because that was the hairdo in those days.
Right.
So they're all jumping up and down and waggling and wiggling. And before I used to look and say, "Oh, look at that girl! Look at that girl!" You know. And then I would go down and see if I can dance with them.
Right.
Well, as I'm looking down on this dance floor, all of a sudden something struck me. It's like my eyes were open, and rather than feeling like this was cool, I began to feel a sudden shock that these people have been deceived to think that life can be found in acting like an animal.
Right.
And I couldn't believe that all this time I was headed that way, thinking that this was life, this was living, this is joy. And no question, there's an exhilaration that comes from it. But as I was looking down, I saw this, and I felt sorry for these people now. Before I used to think that, well, look how cool they are. I felt sorry for them, and sorry for myself to think that all this time I'm spending my life trying to find happiness in that which is fleeting, that which brings excitement for a moment, but does not do anything for you. And so I looked up to the ceiling and I said, God, if you're there, do for me what you've done for my brothers.
Imagine that, a prayer in a dance club And let me ask you, did God hear you?
I left that place and began to feel even more and more horrible about my life. It's like I came to the judgment bar of God, and all the wicked, wretched stuff that I was doing made me feel horrible. So in my apartment, then I began to want to pray, but nobody ever taught me how to pray. So as a kid, I used to do the rosary, and I used to do the Our Father, etc.
Recited prayers.
Recite a prayer, but so I was in agony of soul. For the first time, I felt myself lost, and I had never felt that way before. And it just, the more I talked to God, the worse I felt. And finally, I fell down on my knees. By this time, I was just begging God to take it away. Lord, God, whoever you are, help me. Take these addictions from me, and take this whole thing from me. And I felt something wet on my cheeks, and I wondered what it was. So I looked up to the ceiling to see if there was something dripping from the ceiling.
That says something about the neighborhood you grew up in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but there was nothing dripping. It turned out they were wet and warm, flowing down my cheek. I realized I was crying.
Isn't that funny that you wouldn't recognize it right away?
No, I had become callous. I had become hardened. Unfeeling, and drugs and everything else had taken the place of reality. And so, when I realized, I touched my cheek, and I realized these are tears. I realized I was crying, and for the first time, I realized that something had happened, something miraculous. That which I was asking for was granted. My desires for drink and drugs and all the addictive stuff that I was using immediately disappeared. A warm feeling came over me, and I realized then that God was real.
Wow. So, did your conception of God shift at that point? I mean, it sounded to me like you were almost afraid of God before that time.
Yeah, well, I was afraid, but at this moment, when I wanted to be forgiven, when I wanted to, I began to feel so sorry for the stuff I had done in the past, and I began to confess and ask God to help me. And when that sense came over me, that the God that I thought was not real was real, it brought a great joy into my heart. And then I realized that there was a spot in my heart that I was trying to fill with a bottle or with something else, only to discover that only God can fill that spot.
Wow. So this is the first time then, in all those years, that you actually felt complete.
It was the first time that I realized that the true meaning of life can only be brought to you by God.
Louie, how do you get from that point? We've only got 5 minutes left. I wish we had another hour. Today you're a gospel minister, and obviously 5 minutes won't tell the story of how you ended up doing what you're doing now, but today you stand at the front of a room with a Bible instead of a guitar. Today you are not trying to entertain people. You're sharing the gospel with them and watching God do for them what he did for you. What would you say to somebody who's listening now who maybe has been looking in all of the wrong places for completeness? Maybe they went down the same path. They're looking at entertainment, or maybe it's power or money or fame or any of the things that people chase. What's your word to them at this moment? Because maybe somebody out there right now is starting to come up empty. They're starting to realize that after 10, 20, 30 years of chasing their dreams, they're even less happy than when they started.
My counsel to them is, God is always chasing you, but you're too preoccupied for God to do for you what He alone can do. And we preoccupy ourselves either with trying to accomplish or gain, etc., or with the notion that God does not exist in my own life and all that. But when you realize that there's something missing, and you understand that you've tried this, you've tried that, and it doesn't really get to the place that brings to you the peace that you are longing for, then give God a chance. Like I did. I turned to God. I began to beg God to help me. And when I was sincere enough about my need, acknowledging that I did have a need, and recognizing that nothing else could satisfy it but Him, then is when I came to the experience that God was real. And once that happened, I decided I was going to dedicate my life to Him. I didn't know, one of the things, Shawn, that feared would concern me was that if I become a Christian, I won't have any fun. It's one of those things. Another one was, if I become a Christian, I'll end up being a nobody, working in a dingy factory for the rest of my life. The thought, it was humiliating to think that I would drop and become a nobody.
Sure.
But when I experienced that with God, those things didn't matter anymore. I did work in a factory for a few months, but it was so good to find that I was living a different life.
Right. It wasn't a guitar factory by chance.
No, it was not. It was it was a different kind of factory, and in fact, the owner was Jewish, but he was an atheist.
Wow. And
I became honest and wrote to the government, because I was dodging the draft at the time. That was the height of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, "Don't worry, I can get you off." I said, "I don't want you to get me off." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You want to go to Vietnam and die there?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't want to continue to manipulate my life anymore. I want to let God do it." "God, there is no God," he said. I said, "He's no God to you, but He's very real to me. And I want Him to guide my life." I did go into the Army. I did go become a medic, and I did serve overseas. But I came back with a stronger desire. I saw the miracles of God, the things that He did that before my eyes were blind to. And that created in me a deep desire to go and to share with others the wonderful, loving God that loves us, who longs to reach us, but we're too preoccupied with our own quest.
Phenomenal. Louie, we're out of time, I'm afraid. I'm looking at the clock. I thank God for what He's done in your life, and for those of you who are listening out there, maybe today what you've heard makes sense to you at some level. Maybe you are starting to sense that God's been chasing you since the moment you were born. He's paid attention to your whole life, and you've been resisting. But let me ask you, are you any happier today than you were 20, 30 years ago? Or is it maybe time to listen to that voice and end up in a place where you finally feel complete in Jesus Christ? I believe that's what Colossians 2 and verse 10 promises us, that we can be complete in Him. And maybe that's what you're looking for. Louie, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. And until next time, I'm Shawn Boonstra, and you've been listening to Disclosure.